Welcome to Whispered Love Stories. Today's story is about revenge, because some betrayals demand payback. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I've always believed that revenge is a dish best served cold, and mine took time. It wasn't an impulsive decision or something I plotted from the moment Clark, the man I once loved, mercilessly shattered me. But fate, sometimes, plays in my favor. When Clark and I first started dating, I was different, thinner, more naive, more willing to believe in the sweet words of a charming man. But life happened. Stress, university, responsibilities, and my body changed. I didn't even realize how much weight I had gained until Clark started pulling away. And let's be clear, it wasn't just a few extra pounds. I had doubled in size, and I wasn't sure how it had happened. I had let myself go without even noticing, and as unbelievable as it sounds, it was true. At first, his excuses were subtle. Then they became painfully obvious. He stopped inviting me to gatherings with his friends. He started hiding his phone. And then, one night, without even looking me in the eye, he told me he didn't desire me anymore. He never explicitly said it was about my weight, but the truth was evident. Eventually, he stopped pretending altogether. One day, he looked me straight in the face and admitted it. He was leaving me for someone else, someone more attractive, someone who took care of herself. In other words, someone who wasn't me, someone who wasn't fat. I crumbled. For months, I drowned in heartbreak. I cried over his betrayal, cursed my reflection, and hated myself for not being good enough for him. But when you hit rock bottom, there's only one way to go: up. So, I rebuilt myself. Not for him. For me. I went back to the gym. Not because I wanted someone to find me attractive, but because I wanted to feel strong again. I had reached a point where even tying my shoelaces was a struggle. Walking up a flight of stairs left me winded. Shopping for clothes was a nightmare. Back then, there weren't many options for plus-size women. I changed my diet, and let me tell you, that was the hardest part. But I didn't do it to get thin. I did it because I finally loved myself enough to care. My medical tests were alarming. My cholesterol levels were through the roof. And here's the thing about weight loss. Losing it isn't the hardest part. Keeping it off is. The scars of being obese don't just disappear. Yes, I lost weight. But the skin? It doesn't just shrink back. I had to undergo surgery to remove the excess, and even then, my body never looked like it did in my 20s. But you know what? That was part of the lesson. This journey taught me to love myself exactly as I am. The people who didn't truly love me drifted away, and that was a gift in itself. I finally understood that I am my own priority. My body is the only vessel I have in this life, and no one else is responsible for taking care of it but me. By the time I had rebuilt my confidence, I realized I no longer wanted him back. But I won't lie. I also didn't want to just let him go. I wanted revenge. And I don't mean something as petty as showing up looking stunning just to rub it in his face. Number, I wanted to see him broken. Suffering. Fate handed me the perfect opportunity on a silver platter. One afternoon, in a downtown cafe, I heard a deep, refined voice order an espresso. I looked up, and to my surprise, I found myself staring at Richard, Clark's father. He was a striking man, mature, confident, with the effortless charisma of someone who is used to bending the world to his will. I had only met him briefly while dating Clark, but even then, he had always seemed incredibly charming. and ridiculously wealthy. And if I'm being completely honest, I had always wondered what he'd be like in private. Don't judge me. I'm sure every woman who had ever met him had asked herself the same thing. He was the kind of man women fantasize about, a powerful, wealthy older man who knew exactly what he wanted. But the best part? He didn't recognize me. Of course, he wouldn't. To him, I had probably been just one of his son's many ex-girlfriends, someone entirely forgettable. So, without hesitation, I made my move. I approached him, pretending it was pure coincidence, and struck up a conversation. I still remember my opening line. "The coffee here is fantastic." Naturally, I said it in my most flirtatious tone. To my delight, he was in a friendly mood, perhaps even flirting back, or at least, that's how it seemed to me. I boldly asked if I could join him and offered to buy him another cup. He smiled and said yes, though he mentioned he wouldn't be able to stay long. 15 minutes. That's all I had. But 15 minutes was enough. By the time he left, I had his number. Now, here's something I should mention. I knew he wasn't single. I had met Clark's mother before, and to be honest, I never liked her. She was an uptight, arrogant woman who looked down on everyone. A few days later, he called me. He wanted to meet for coffee. I wasn't surprised by the times he suggested, always between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., the carefully chosen hours of a man with something to hide. Luckily for him, my job allowed me the flexibility to meet whenever he wanted. And honestly, I found it adorable that he thought he was being discreet. It was almost laughable. Even when he showed up without a ring on his finger, the faint indentation on his skin betrayed him. I had no doubt the ring was sitting in his pocket, just waiting to be slipped back on the moment we said goodbye. And that was exactly what I wanted. Richard and I started seeing each other frequently. I was fascinated by him. His voice, his confidence, the way he moved like a man who owned every room he walked into. He knew exactly what to say to make me laugh, to make me feel like I was the only woman in the world. But it wasn't just a game. I genuinely liked his company, and yet, sometimes, I couldn't help but fantasize about destroying his family, about making Clark suffer in some twisted way. I often imagined the look on his face if he ever found out. We continued seeing each other until, one day, he finally admitted he was married. I acted shocked for dramatic effect. I played my role flawlessly, eyes wide, breath hitching, voice trembling just enough when I said, "I already knew. But I can't walk away. I'm crazy about you. I think you might be the love of my life." And to my utter delight, he believed every word. He grabbed my waist and kissed me like I had never been kissed before. That same night, he called me again. But this time, it wasn't for coffee. He wanted to meet at night, in a hotel. And we both knew exactly what that meant. I saw him arrive. He didn't greet me, didn't say a word, just whispered, "Follow me." We stepped into the elevator together. He already had the key to the room in his hand. He had planned every detail. And that bothered me. Was he really being this careful because his marriage still mattered to him? At what point had I become the mistress of my ex-boyfriend's father? But my irritation didn't last long. When we entered the room, my breath caught. Candles, roses, scattered petals. There was champagne, chocolates, a breathtaking view of the city skyline, and a jacuzzi. He had thought of everything. Then he handed me a small box. I don't know why, but for a second, I wanted it to be a ring. It was stupid. He was married. I opened it. Diamond earrings. I had never even touched a real diamond before. It felt surreal. I looked at him, ready to thank him, when he whispered, "I love you." And then, we kissed. Richard was unlike any man I had ever been with. He knew exactly how to touch me, how to make me feel desired, worshipped with every caress. Every slow, deep kiss stole the air from my lungs. His hands, experienced and confident, explored my body like he was discovering something precious. The whispers against my skin, his warm breath on my neck, the way his body pressed against mine. With him, I felt powerful, loved. He taught me that pleasure was a weapon, and I wielded it masterfully. Our passion burned for 2 years, until I got bored of being his mistress. And then, I changed the game. This time, my goal wasn't just to walk away. I wanted to destroy his marriage, but in a way that left me untouched, unscathed. This is where my best friend came in. She had known about my affair for a while, and she hated what I was doing. Not because I was with a married man, but because she believed I had serious self-worth issues for allowing myself to be in this situation. What she didn't know was that Richard was the father of the man who once destroyed me. So, I asked her for help. And since she loved drama, she didn't hesitate. She created a fake email account and messaged Richard's wife on Instagram. She told her that her husband had been having an affair for years. The woman dismissed it as a cruel joke and blocked the account. So we made another one, and another. By the 5th attempt, we changed tactics. No messages, just a location and a time. My address. The exact time Richard and I had planned to meet that night. I assumed she hadn't taken it seriously, because that night, nothing happened. Richard carried on as usual, completely unaware. So we turned it into a habit. Every time we went to the movies, every time we had dinner, every time we met for a simple cup of coffee. She got a message. Nothing happened. Until one day, Richard was served with divorce papers, filled with photos of us together, everywhere. His wife had hired a private investigator to follow him. When he told me, I was shocked. Why hadn't she assumed it was me tipping her off? How had I managed to come out of this completely untouched? Then he told me what she was asking for in the divorce settlement, and suddenly, everything made sense. She wanted everything. She was going to ruin him, take him for everything he had. And she didn't care if he stayed with me or not. She just wanted to make sure he lost everything. Richard was shaken, but not nearly as much as I expected. And that's when I realized something. He actually loved me. "I've been thinking about leaving my wife for a while," he admitted. "So, I've already moved most of my assets to my mother's name." He had anticipated this. He had made sure his wife would be financially secure, but not powerful enough to destroy him. And it worked. She got the house, some of the cars, and a property in California. But the business, the real wealth, she couldn't touch it. Clark got a few assets, but nothing significant. And finally, the divorce was finalized. I no longer had to hide, and I had won. Our relationship became official quickly. Richard fell for me with an intensity that even I hadn't expected. He saw me as the woman his ex-wife had never been. Someone who reignited his passion, his drive, his very life. And when, a year later, he proposed, I knew my revenge was complete. But I was careful. I avoided every conversation about his son. I made sure Clark never came to our home. Every time Richard suggested we meet, I had an excuse ready. Because my plan was simple. I wanted to see Clark's face at our wedding. That moment alone would be worth a lifetime. And I got exactly what I wanted. The wedding was grand, a flawless guest list, luxury at every turn. But when I walked down the aisle, I forgot everything. For a fleeting second, I wanted nothing more than to marry Richard, not for revenge, not for power, but because in that moment, it felt right. And then I remembered. Clark was there. I searched for him in the crowd, and the moment I found him, I felt his stare pierce through me. For a brief second, my nerves got the best of me. I almost couldn't look at him. I was shaking, but I couldn't let fear ruin this moment. So I took a deep breath, and during the wedding toast, I let myself savor the full weight of my revenge. I raised my glass, locked eyes with Clark, and said, "Before finding Richard, love wasn't kind to me. I met men with poor hearts, men with nothing to offer. But Richard, he has given me more than I ever dreamed of." Clark's face twisted with rage. His eyes burned with pure hatred. He was sitting beside a woman, not the one he had left me for, but someone new. She was stunning, but she looked miserable. He wouldn't stop whispering in her ear, gesturing wildly, gripping his drink like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. His tie was loosened, his face flushed. He was already drunk. At one point, he stumbled past me and spat a single insult under his breath. "You bitter, resentful bitch." That was the last thing he ever said to me. He left before anyone even noticed. But the real satisfaction came later. Slowly, over time, I convinced Richard that we needed a sabbatical life, a fresh start, a chance to truly enjoy everything he had built. I planted the seed that his son needed to earn his own way, that he had already been given too much, that Richard had worked too hard to let Clark simply inherit his success. And so, little by little, Richard sold off his company. We left. Today, we travel the world. Months-long cruises. Vacations across continents. We don't live in excess, but we never have to work. We have everything we need. I have never felt more at peace. Clark, however, he still sends me hate emails. He blames me for tearing his family apart, for convincing his father to sell the company he thought he would inherit. Now, he's the one taking care of his mother. Now, he works a 9-to-5 job, one that doesn't afford him the luxurious life he was once accustomed to. Richard found out long ago that his son was my ex, but he never cared. And he will never know that I knew exactly who Clark was from the very beginning. He believes me, and that is the final piece of my revenge. Not with violence, not with screaming, but with the cold satisfaction of knowing that Clark will never be able to escape what I've become. His stepmother, the woman who left him with nothing and a family in ruins. If you enjoyed my confession, don't forget to subscribe. We'll be sharing more stories every week.